So the marathon, I did the New York City Marathon on Sunday, and it was one of the toughest and yet most incredible experiences I've ever had. I don't want to sound like a cliche because I know a lot of people that do the marathon, they're like, oh my goodness, it was amazing. And it really is. But what I want to do is take you through the journey over the last few months and hopefully get you a glimpse into what the experience was like. Just for those of you who have any interest in what the journey was, as well as those of you who donated and those of you who shared messages of support over the last few months, especially over the last few days. I wanted to share the experience as fully as possible. So there's two things that I've been trying to figure out myself as I'm thinking through the whole last few weeks. First is, why was this such a big deal to me? Right? Well, why was this so important to me? The notion of running a marathon. I'd done a marathon before when I was 22, and that was the Dublin Marathon. And I was delighted. I very much enjoyed it. But why was this so much more meaningful to me? And why was this so much more important to me? Right? It dominated my thoughts. It was such a big deal. And I was very wary over getting sick or, I had injuries constantly, and there was an awful lot of setbacks along the journey. And that's the first question I want to hopefully answer. The second question I want to answer is, what was the experience like? And hopefully by sharing that with all of you, it'll give you a sense as to perhaps some of the lessons or learnings that we could get from an experience like this. One of the things that many of you are aware of is I like to turn almost everything into lessons or learnings that we can get. I'm sure many of you are like that as well. When we go through the biggest challenges that we face, of course, we need to be able to find ways to be able to make the most of them, find meaning out of them. And again, at risk of being a cliched middle-age, oh, what are you going to do next? Are you going to buy a fancy car? Are you going to, have an affair? Are you going to, whatever, take up a totally new job? I mean, I've been having midlife crises for the last 10 years or so. I moved to the States, packed up everything and completely changed countries, got a green card, and finally this year got a citizenship. So I moved countries, moved continents, and completely set up a brand new business with regards to on the American side. And one could argue that that's a midlife crisis. One could certainly argue that doing a marathon when you're 46 years old and you're not necessarily a runner, certainly not built as a runner, that would warrant another midlife crisis. And maybe it is. Maybe part of it is, as you get old, you start to think to yourself, right, I need to make sure that I'm pushing back against this age that keeps, constantly moving forward and forward and forward. And running a marathon and staying fit is a way of sort of feeling younger. So I'm going through all this psychology in my head. And maybe that's part of the importance of it. But I think a real part of the importance of it was sometimes you give yourself a goal that you're not sure if you can do. And for me, whenever it's a mental goal, I kind of back myself in the sense of I'm a very good mental game. So I'm quite mentally strong. But this was, for the first time in a long time, a physical goal. And physically, I've never been great, right? For those of you who aren't aware, over the last 3 years, actually over the last 5 years, I've broken my arm 3 times, twice my left arm, once my right, while running. I fell all exact same way, tripped, fell, landed on my 2 hands and broke right the inside of my elbow 3 times. And so constantly, whenever I'm running, I'm aware that I could trip up because I'm relatively clumsy. Like I walk into things, I trip and fall. I'm kind of sometimes in my own world. And so training for this marathon for about 4 months or so, every single time I went out, I was wary. You need to make sure you're watching where you're going. I know that seems like of course, but it wasn't an of course for me. So that was the first thing. It was like making sure that I get through without having another injury. I also messed up and got broke my ankle as well, sprained my ankle as well. Now that was playing football. But that was another injury that I had like about 1.5 years, 2 years ago or whatnot. And so I have all of these different injuries that are there in the back of my mind. And I know that they're ever present. It's all possible. And over the last few years, I've also had stomach issues as well. So my stomach has been, I've been in and out of hospital getting different types of tests. And I say all that just to sort of set up the stage of when I decided to do the marathon, it wasn't just a case of, okay, you train for a run and then you run. part of it was all of these things that could go wrong, all of the challenges that I might face along the way. And then if you add that to, I wasn't just trying to run the marathon. I wanted to get a really good time. So I wanted to run as fast as I possibly could. And that, therefore, I needed to push myself as much as I possibly was able to. And so I set up a nice training regime for 4 months. And I sort of started slowly but surely getting into it early July. I was kind of preparing mentally, decided to do it in May or June. Knew I was going to get a place, I think July. And I started to like ground up the training. Had to train when I went to Greece for a few weeks. I had to train at 7 a.m. every morning, and we'd go to bed about 1 or 2. So I was only getting not enough sleep, but I could only train then because otherwise it was too hot to train. So I was going out for 6 mile, 7 mile, 8 mile runs, and I had to do a few long runs there. I think a 12 mile, maybe a 14 mile when I was in Greece. And that was rough. And then came back to Ireland and then went back over to New York. And back in September, I did a 20-mile run, which is the longest run that you do for a marathon. So those 20 miles, it took just over 3 hours or so. And that was, I actually felt it was tough, but I felt okay there. And the following week was an 18-mile, and everything was going according to plan. I was going to go less mileage and then go back up to 20 miles. But right after the 18-mile, I started getting really bad sort of spasms and tightness in my hamstring. And nothing seemed to help until my physio was a great guy, Carlos, in a place called Body Hack. He figured out that it was actually sciatica. So sciatica is when there's a sciatica nerve that goes through from, I think, your back down through your leg. And in my glutes and the bottom of my back, so my lower back, the muscles were tight and pressing in on the nerve, which is shooting referred pain down my hamstring. So the work that he did was actually on my glutes and on my lower back, and that gave me some relief. But then after 2 or 3 more runs, again, it came back. And so I was going twice a week for the last 4 weeks. It meant I couldn't do any long runs. I did nothing over, I think 13 miles was my longest run within a month and a half before the marathon. And so I really, ideally would have been doing my 20-mile 3 weeks out from the marathon. And I wasn't able to do all that. So my whole training was curbed. And so in my mind, I'm also planning, I want to get as good a time as possible. And initially I was trying to get as close to 4 hours as possible. I was pretty sure I wasn't going to break 4 hours, but if I could get as close to 4 hours as possible, maybe under 4:10, that'd be amazing. And I worked really hard, but I knew with this injury, I had to reduce my expectations. So I said, look, with this injury, if I can get it under 4:30, that would still be a great result, especially with all the injuries, especially at my age or whatnot. So that was the new expectation. And again, even the week leading up to it, there was all sorts of ups and downs. My stomach was really giving me problems, and there was a lot of pain in there. And just did all the things I needed to do. Probably bought too many contraptions for my legs, right? Because I was like, okay, I need this, and did whatever I could that was in controls, like focus on the controllables and all that. And then finally, luckily, I woke up early at 5 o'clock in the morning on Sunday and got myself out. I had to get a taxi got some little bit of food, got a taxi to Staten Island Ferry in the south of Manhattan, got the ferry over to Staten Island, got the bus to the racing village, and then I was there for about 2.5 hours. It was quite cold. And then you go into your corral, which is where you're about to start to run from. And it's an incredible experience. Literally, there's thousands of people around you. Everyone is excited. There's music blaring. They start with first of all, the American national anthem. Then the cannon fires off. Then it's Frank Sinatra as you start running up. Now you're running uphill for the first mile. It's known as being the hardest major to a lot of people. And that first mile is all uphill. That's part of the reason. But you go all the way up, and then obviously what comes up, what's come down, and then you come down into Brooklyn. And then it's a long stretch for about 4 miles. For about maybe 6 miles of Brooklyn. Then you start going into South Williamsburg, another part of Brooklyn, and eventually you go over towards Queens. I was doing great. So I was running, I was feeling good. I was, nice even pace, quite fast, but I was going perfect for pretty much all Brooklyn. And then when I crossed into Queens, which is the halfway mark, I was still doing fine. I had a few different friends and loved ones that were along the route. So stopped briefly with them, but I was going fine. I was doing really well. And then I crossed over from Queens into Manhattan, and again, another tough one, but that again was fine. It's the Queensboro Bridge. And then I was on mile 17, which was 1 mile into Manhattan. And it's a long straight. It's First Avenue in Manhattan, which goes all the way up to the Bronx. And at mile 17, my back seized. So I felt my back cramping up. All the muscles got really tight. And in my head, I'm like, oh shit, here we go. And then my left leg this time, which my right was where the issue was. My left leg, I felt the same sensation as on my right. And then I had my right. And then my calf started to cramp. So I started getting cramps all over my body. Now, this is 17 miles in. I still have 9 miles to go, which is more or less, let's say 90 minutes to run with this. So eventually I had some friends at mile 19 and I pushed through for 2 miles, stopped with them for, maybe 30 seconds, just got some, jellies and stuff like that and a drink. And then it was to go up this bridge into Bronx. So at that stage, I put in my earphones and normally, by the way, what's incredible is I had my name on my shirt. Probably 1,000 times people would shout, "Come on, Owen, you got this." Like you feel like a celebrity. You feel like you're a professional athlete as you're running there. So I run into the Bronx and I'm struggling. And at this stage, I just put in my things. The support has got me this far, but I'm like, now I need to really like concentrate. So I put in my earphones and I had a playlist with, Rocky and I mean, it's, ridiculous, but I had Rocky. I had The Show Must Go On, which is an all-time great for me. Braveheart, all these different things. And I had all of that like played for about 45 minutes or so. And so press play on that. And then I just grit my teeth and went. And I got through the Bronx okay. And then I went back into Manhattan. And there's a lot of hills there. And so I had some friends there as well and stopped briefly for them. But that's when I really started to feel it. And my legs started to seize up. Cramps were everywhere. My back was killing me. My shoulders were killing me. My neck was killing me. My hamstrings were both hurting and spasming. I felt spasms all over. And a number of times I had to stop, but I didn't want to stop for too long. So I was walking and then I went back into a run. And I kept, at one point, it felt like I had no control over the rest of my body. So my brain was literally like right, left. And I pushed my legs to keep moving. And then I got back running each time. And this happened multiple times over the last 3 miles or so. But I just, every single fiber of my soul, like the last 9 miles, especially the last 5 miles, were all done from my heart, from my head, just from my will alone. And I just pushed through. I used every single cell that I could. And then finally I saw the finishing line. And I got across the finishing line. And then it all came down. I like chills down the back of my neck. I just kept thinking about all the, uncertainty about whether or not I'd be able to participate, of all the injuries and the pain there, all the letdowns, the disappointments, the sickness, the goal that for whatever reason was such a big deal to me. I think part of it was, like I talked about earlier, the fact that, you, as you get older, it's the finding meaning in something challenging and feeling that's it's you. But I think also it was such a tough thing to do. And I needed to challenge myself because I love that feeling of pushing the boundaries of what's possible for me and experiencing that. And so when I got to the finishing line and I crossed it and you keep walking, I could barely walk. I mean, at this stage I was like swaying because I had no energy left. My legs were gone. My body was gone. And I just kept thinking about what I'd done. And my time, again, I was trying to get under 4:30. My time was 4:07. So I'd even gotten the time that I was, obviously I didn't break 4 hours, but I got the time that I was aiming for, that I would have done, would have been aiming for without an injury. And having that with an injury and a messed up training, I couldn't be more proud of myself. And I had amazing support at my family or my loved ones, family back home, friends, incredible friends along the route that came out, cheered. And friends of mine that I'd talked to at home and got some help and support and advice. So, you do rely on a lot of people to be able to help you, but I didn't run it. Like, there's my marathon medal, right? And I love it. And it's great. Out of all the medals I've ever gotten for anything, this means a lot, but it's not because it's a medal. It's just because of the experience of pushing yourself. And ultimately, my body was gone with a few miles to go, and everything else was just sheer will. And I guess when I'm looking for meaning in that, and I think to myself, what's the lesson? The lesson is sign up for a marathon. No, not necessarily. The lesson is you can do it. The lesson is all of these different cliches about what is possible if you put your mind to it. I don't even think any of those are really the lessons. To me, the lesson that I suppose want to impart to you all when it comes to this experience is we are almost creatures that find more meaning when there's challenge. And the more adversity that we find ourselves facing, the more meaningful our experiences can be. So to me, the thing that made the marathon so important to me, because I've been asking myself that question over and over, why is this such a big deal? Was because how hard it was. And if it was a lot easier, then it wouldn't be so big. And so the call to action, I suppose, is to challenge yourself more, whatever that means for you, to challenge yourself more. Many of you challenge yourself every day. You've got incredibly tough lives, tough jobs. Bringing up a child, having children is extremely tough. Maintaining relationships can be very tough. A lot of the work that you do can be very tough. But one of the beauties of choosing the struggles that we face is that allows us to become greater as a result. I love the quote by Rilke, and I'm going to butcher the quote a bit, but the purpose of life is to be defeated by greater and greater things. And that's my favorite quote, because it's this notion that in order for you to be defeated by something greater, you must have reached that stage. You must have already defeated something else. And at some point, what is it that makes people have these midlife crises? It's because ultimately speaking, we're halfway. Now, the idea is that you're suddenly aware that you're getting older and you're closer to death than you are to birth. And when you start thinking like that, you start to realize, wow, I'm only here for a certain amount of time. And so at that moment, that realization makes you then go, so I need to make sure I do everything I possibly can do to be able to live this as fully as possible. And that means that when you set yourself a challenge, forget about the fact that it's something that you have to be fit for. So it's like the opposite to death. You're as full of life as you can be for it. But it's really by challenging yourself there, you're deciding to turn around and say, I want to do more. I want to become greater. I want to become stronger. And the clock's ticking, because at this stage in life, you know that every second counts more than ever. And I don't know if this will be my last marathon. I certainly feel like it is right now. But whatever else I do, it's the challenges that I need to put in front of me, because every time I do, it makes me stronger and makes me feel better. And it gives me a massive amount of meaning. So the next time you turn around and go, I don't get it. I don't understand why people run marathons. Well, it's not to do with the fact that people like running. I don't like running. Believe it or not, I don't. And I like the experience I feel when I've run, not the endorphins, but the actual feeling that I ran this morning is a good feeling, but it's testing yourself and pushing yourself. There's a real beauty of that. And I think far too often we live in very easy lives where the purpose of the technology we surround ourselves with and the purpose of everything we surround ourselves with is to make our lives easier and to make ourselves lazier. And to me, one of the things that I think we all need to do is we need to get more comfortable in pushing ourselves. And a marathon was that for me. And it really made a positive difference to my life. So if you're saying to yourself, Owen, you just stole 20 minutes of my life that I'll never get back, then apologies, but sure, look, these things happen. Anyway, I hope this gives whoever was interested in what the experience was like some idea as to what the whole saga was about and what it meant to me. And I hope that you can take something from that, maybe an insight that might help you as well. But again, thanks very much to everyone. Take care, be well, and until the next time, may the force, as always, be with you. Bye for now.